So just as a recap of what type of theory Marxism is. First of all, it's a macro theory, it's structural, and it's a conflict approach. So that conflict approach is based on the idea that there is inequality between, in this case, social classes. Now, in Marxism, there are two social class groups. First, these are the bourgeoisie, so the middle class, the upper class, the people who are in charge. They have power, they have status, they have money, and that money comes from the fact they own the means of production. So factories, industry, anything where money is made. Now, the other social class are the proletariat. These are the poor, the working class, the people who don't have money, power, or status. They have to work for the bourgeoisie to earn their money. This is how capitalism maintains its power. The poor work for the rich make the money, the poor have none. Part of the reproduction and legitimation that takes place through these processes allows capitalism to continue, and that's because of transmissions of values through socialization, and that's part of what we call the false conscious, where we don't realize we're being exploited and we keep going along with it. Now, the first thinker we have is Engels. Now, Engels talks about a couple of things. He talks about the development of the monogamous nuclear family. And again, he was sort of quite an early Marxist. He was writing with Marx around the time when they sort of produced the Communist Manifesto. But his key argument, and I'm going to sort of use this very crude image to help explain it, was about protection of wealth. So if you imagine the first gentleman here, he's having a relationship with his wife and he's produced children, but he's also having lots of other relationships with working class women. So there's no monogamy in the relationship. He's basically sleeping with whoever he wants. Obviously, that's producing all these illegitimate children. Now, when he dies, what would happen is his wealth would be passed to his wife and his legitimate children, but also his illegitimate children would also receive some of his wealth, as he is their father. And what this means is that the rich, or the middle classes, the upper classes, they would have some of this money, but it also ensures that money, or allowed money, to go to the working classes. Now, Engels said that this, obviously, the development of the monogamous nuclear families we can see at the bottom, developed as part of the process of protecting all this cash. So in the monogamous nuclear family, the husband, as we see here, he will only have a relationship with his wife. She, in turn, will only have a relationship with him. So any children they have, there's the guarantee that they are biologically his. Also, we're talking about the sort of early 1900s, late 1800s, when you didn't have lie detector tests and Jeremy Kyle and all those sort of means of checking who the parents were. Now, what this means, he gets biological children from the wife. She is looked after and protected by him. And then all the money that he's accrued, all his private property, all his wealth, goes straight to his children. And then some of it will go to her, the wife. And this keeps the rich rich. So the middle classes keep all the money and they are happy. So rich rich and poor poor. And that was Engels' first argument. Now, arguments against Engels, obviously, he is outdated. This is a modern view, old-fashioned. We know now that people don't marry to pass down inheritance. People don't have to get married to have children to pass down wealth. The monogamous nuclear family, also benefited women at the time because women knew who the father of their children was. Doesn't necessarily need to apply today. But criticisms, obviously, this is a patriarchal family. Women are in this glorified position of almost like full-time prostitutes working for the husband. But it did lead to the development of sort of fixed or serial monogamous relationships. So that's Engels, that's the first argument. Now, Zaretsky's our second argument. He's also at the false class consciousness, power of children over parents, or pester power, the buffer zone, ideological illusion, and units of consumption. So again, with our very crude image, if you imagine we've got Mr. Bourgeoisie, the factory owner. Now, this is where all the money comes from. The factory is making the money. The workers, as we see here, they work in the factory. They are doing the hard work that makes the money. And obviously, the bourgeoisie, he gives a very small proportion of that money to the workers. Now, because of that, they're tired, they're angry, frustrated, they're stressed, and they're devalued. And you can see they're angry from that. Now, the buffer zone, if you imagine these men come home after a long day of hard work. Their wives, their family act as the buffer zone. This calms them down. So buffer zone, calming them down, de-stressing them, making them happy. Now, as a result, these men then go back to work the following day. They make the money for the capitalist, he pays them, they get angry. Now, because the family de-stresses and calms them down, and it has this calming effect over them, it keeps them happy and means that they don't direct their anger at their employer. They don't direct their anger at the bourgeoisie, but more so at their wives. So that's the buffer zone. Now, we've also got this pester power, this economic unit consumption function of the family. So the family, and children particularly, cause people to spend money. So again, the spending of that money is often buying goods and services, which ultimately makes its way back to the bourgeoisie. So again, the bourgeoisie are paying the workers a small amount of money from the profit they've produced. The workers then spend that money on goods and services, which ultimately makes its way back to the bourgeoisie. So again, how the family feeds into capitalism. So we talk about this idea of the false consciousness. So the idea that, you know, our families that brainwashed into this. And no, we're not. We know families do become aware of their spending, using money to survive, and employers can be easily replaced. As we can see in the last week, obviously people could be easily sacked and terminated. So people know this is the position. But you're often trapped in this economic cycle, so families can't resist it. But again, Zaretsky is also basing this on nuclear families and ignoring any type of diversity. Next, we have Althusser. Now, Althusser is again another Marxist. He's exactly the same as in education. His key argument, the key thing he's talking about, is the ideological state apparatus. And in this case, the family is that ideological state apparatus. They are the mechanism for teaching the values of capitalism. And as you can see, these values, these ideologies, they come down to parents, and then parents teach it to their children through socialization. So again, what happens is this is part of that legitimation and reproduction. So reproduces the acceptance of capitalism, but also values like hierarchy. So the parents have the power, the children have none, and you do what the people with power tell you to. So power is higher at the top, children have very little power, parents have a lot. And again, you accept that hierarchy. That's preparing you for the world of work, where you will listen to the people in charge who have the power, who control you. So just the arguments against Althusser is the state oppressive to the family? Which it is. Families are controlled by the state, social workers, police. So again, as a form of ideological state control, the family also subjected to state control. And this leads us lastly onto Donzelot. Now Donzelot, again, another key Marxist thinker, he talks about how, again, the state controls the families. So the best example I've got, again, very poor drawing, but if you imagine you have got this working class family. Now they are all families are being surveyed and watched by doctors, by social workers, by teachers, any state professional. And if that family is seen as not doing a very good job, they're not performing their functions for capitalism, they're not performing socialization properly, they're not providing care for the children, they're not seen to be doing their job properly, then the state has the power to take the children and place them in a home which will perform the function. And that could be potentially a middle class home. So again, the idea that the family is surveyed, monitored and checked by the state to ensure it's doing its job. And that job ultimately is to teach the values that capitalism is good and support and encourage capitalism. Now, again, particularly poor families are targeted. So it is the working class who are targeted, according to Donzelot. But part of the issue could be that it isn't just because working class families are bad at doing their job. It might be that they're in a weaker position to negotiate their position to get out of this supervision and restriction. Okay.